Hello and welcome to another episode of the Lowdown. Today I am joined by a man who is quite the coaching pedigree indeed, having coached in four different continents, Lee Johnson. Lee, welcome to the show.
I'm well, thank you very much, Connor. How are you doing?
All good. Lee, I believe the last time we got a chance to speak in depth about football was around this time last year during my ill-fated short-term stint at Barnet. What have you been up to since?
It's been a crazy year, hasn't it? Let's be honest. I think no one realised that this pandemic was going to be as serious as it was and impact so many people in the way it has done. So for me personally, when we went into lockdown last year, the club basically decided to give everyone their notice and offer the opportunity for people to work out their notice, which I basically decided to do. I ended up finishing my contract at the end of July, I think it was. But that period was quite a challenge because you still had players that were associated with the club, and also the club was banking on trying to get promotion back into the Football League through the playoffs. And I think that if the club had got promoted, then the academy would have stayed open. But the pandemic hit Barnet really hard, and has also hit many clubs very hard as well. So it made sense for the owners to pull the plug, which is a shame because there's some really good people that worked there and some very good players that we had in the academy. But it's just, what can you do? There's not much you can actually do. So hopefully within time everyone moves on and gets where they need to be. But for me, it's actually been quite nice to spend time with my family and just reflect on my time and what I've done over the last 5-10 years, and to see how I might kind of choose to focus my career in the future. I think the lockdown has enabled me to spend a lot of time with my son, which has really been good for me, because I think like when you're in a game, it consumes you a lot. And so, when he was first born, I didn't really see much of him in that first year, and not as much as I'd liked. And that's purely because of the commitment, that you put under when you're working in football. So I think having a time with him and partner has been a blessing out of all this, really. So that's really been good for me.
And I suppose for someone like yourself, Lee, just being involved in the game from grassroots up, playing the game at a young age, to being in academies yourself, to coaching at a high level, the last year was probably the longest period of time, correct me if I'm wrong, that you would have spent outside of the game. Obviously, you say just, getting to spend time with your son and your young family. Do you think there's much more football can be doing, especially at a professional level, in terms of that work-life balance, especially for coaches?
I think it's something that does need to be looked into a little bit more. I think, we try to make the environment as good as it possibly can be for the players, but I do think that staff do get overlooked at times. The hours that some people put in, is incredible. And I know people that are putting 60, 70, 80 hours a week, working all hours God sends and for little reward. And that's quite demoralizing for some people. And I know that some people have actually come away from the game because of that, because, it's too much. They're not getting much back in return for the time and the efforts that they're putting in. So I do think clubs need to be a bit more aware of people that they have at a club. I think one of my key values is valuing people, and I think that not just football, but just organisations in general need to be more aware of individuals and individual situations, because if you're looking after people, you're taking care of them, you understand what their needs are, and you might be able to support them and help develop in a better way you're probably going to get, you know, better outcome, you know, from the people that are employed at wherever it is. So I just think the pandemic has shaped that as well. I think a lot of organizations and companies now would have realized that there are other ways to do things, as we all know now, like remote working, and, you know, working from home has proven to be a big success. And there's been a lot of people that have been very productive, like working in this way. And, you know, I think it's a way for the future. And I can see, you know, a lot of companies sticking to this, you know, way of working, maybe getting people to come in a few days a week and then the rest of the time working from home. And it gives people a chance to spend time with their loved ones and be able to socialize as well, because that's really, really important. Like,
Yeah.
you know, so I'd like to say, you know, that would happen. Hopefully, you know, it can, you know, in the future.
I think what people outside the football industry as well, they don't recognise, Lee, is that, you know, being a football coach itself is a loose kind of definition. It's a loose term to describe the overall role. Because not only are you coaching, you're facilitating, you're a tutor, you're an educator, you're a parent, you're doing all one of the above, you know, 5 or 6 different things at any one time. Getting into the game then at a young age, growing up in Kent, what was that kind of spark that would have ignited your passion for the game?
I just think, like, playing with my friends, you know, I was lucky to grow up in a nice part of the world. We had a lot of open space. So we'd spend all the time playing outside on the grass and replicating what we'd seen on TV, you know, trying to score the goals from our favourite players. And this is probably the same as most kids around the world that play the game at an early age. And I think that was probably the trigger for me, like starting out in football, just because I enjoyed it and I enjoyed playing with my friends and trying to be like my idols. You know, I really loved Brian Robson back in the day. I remember wearing the old England kit from 1986 and had Brian Robson's shin pads and that.
You're not one of those London Man United fans, are you?
I am indeed, mate. I'm loyal to the cause.
Oh, God.
But, you know, in saying that, I had a membership for Man United, to be fair. Like, back in the mid-2000s, me and a friend basically got a membership package for a few years, and we would go up and see United when we could, which was really good. But that really come from my dad, like getting me into supporting Man United. He's obviously been in the game a long time, and you know, he was playing from an early age and played at a decent level. But Man United was his club, but his London club was Charlton. So those are the two clubs that, you know, I used to follow more than anything growing up. And I think my dad had a big influence in me as well. I think he wanted me to succeed and do well. And, you know, I'm thankful for my parents, really, because they supported me in everything that I've done, but especially at an early age. You know, they used to travel, you know, take me everywhere, travel all over the place, and, you know, made sure I was able to get to training and get to games, which is something that I'm, you know, really, really thankful for.
It's only, I suppose, upon reflection that you can only connect the dots going backwards. You can't really connect them going forwards. How much do you think today's generation are losing out as a result of COVID, or even as a result of, you know, you mentioned going out there having World Cups, kickabouts with your mates growing up. We all know before COVID we were losing that social element anyhow, you know, with the proliferation of video games, social media, so on and so forth. What effect do you think that will have in the next generation of players coming through, or kids, so to speak, more importantly?
Well, I think society's changed anyway, isn't it? You know, it's changed, you know, and it will always continue to change. Actually, if anything, I think the pandemic may have, you know, done the reverse and got people to want to be together and play and, you know, engage with one another, because you spent such a long time apart from your friends that you'd want to go out and play, and so it could have a positive effect in that way. You look at with the schools reopening, and my sister's got 3 children, and, you know, you're hearing them excited about going to school because they're going to see their friends, their teachers. And that could be the same when you're going out and playing with your friends at home. So hopefully the pandemic will have a positive influence on people like connecting and playing outside. But it's hard to kind of pinpoint, you know, because even from when I grew up to now, you know, there has been a massive shift in cultural societies, and, you know, you don't see that many kids playing, you know, as they used to be. Like, we would be out from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m, pretty much, just go in for a bit of food and then go back out again. You don't necessarily see that, and that is a shame. But hopefully that will change.
And then I suppose you yourself as a coach, Lee, you would have been in the academy environment yourself as a player at Millwall, and then going coaching at a young age at Crystal Palace. What was the academy environments in both, like Millwall and Crystal Palace, compared to what you've been exposed to nowadays?
Back when I was growing up at Millwall, it's obviously very, very different to what it is now. Like, it's so much more professional nowadays. So that's the obvious thing for me, like the infrastructures that are in place, the resources that are available. You know, you've got people that specialise in certain areas of the game that are helping to develop players in a holistic, you know, approach. Whereas when I grew up, it was literally, you would be, you know, sent to a training facility. There wasn't, Millwall at the time didn't have their own kind of training ground where all the kids came to and used to train in the evenings. They used to hire multiple training facilities across London. So we used to train at Southwark Park on a Monday, you know, and you'd have, you know, loads of kids come in for different age groups. And it was a very much old school approach back then. Like, the coaches that I had were very much old school driven, and they were former players themselves, you know, full of experience, good knowledge of the game, maybe taught you in a different way that, you know, you would see coaches teaching players today. Probably be a bit more ruthless towards you at times, and, you know, a bit straight, a bit more black and white in how they, you know, went about the way they spoke to people. But that's what it was like back then. I think as time has moved on, people have become more educated. People have got to understand that everyone's needs are different. There's more support for coaches. People are getting more exposure, and I think people have the ability and the opportunities to learn more from others, which is maybe what wasn't in place back then when I was growing up, especially for coaches. You didn't have the internet, so coaches weren't able to go online and source like coaching sessions, or, you know, reach out to people like we're doing now, and having conversations about you know, around football. So it was very, very different. You know, when I was at Millwall, we would train on a Monday and a Wednesday, and we would only really play during the half-term periods, because you wouldn't sign for a pro club until you was 14, until you was a schoolboy. So up until that period, you were still playing for your grassroots team on a Sunday. So let's say from 10 to 14, you were still playing, you know, with your mates on a Sunday, but you'd be doing your additional training with like the club that you was training with in the week. And I actually think that was quite a good way of doing it, because it still kept it quite pure for me. You know, you're still playing football with your friends. There's an element of seriousness around football, because when you're stepping into a professional club, the level of players, you know, is better. The coaching is better. The expectations that are put on you are a lot higher. So the whole level, moves up. Whereas obviously nowadays, kids are going into academies from the age of 6, like doing pre-academy and then, getting signed at 9. I don't know if that's too early, because you almost take that kind of fun element away from kids, I think, and I just think that if you're bringing children into a professional club at such a young age, the most important thing is you have to make it as fun, as enjoyable as possible, and almost remove some of like the tactical side of football and the development side of football away from it, because the most important thing is you want kids to be enjoying themselves, and you want them to be there. And if they're not going to get that through playing with their friends, that they have at school or from where they live, when they're coming into that environment, it just needs to be a fun place to be. you know, because there's a lot of pressure that gets put on these young players at a young age, whether that's meant or not. I don't think so. I think it's unconsciously done, just because they're stepping into a professional environment.
Exactly. I think that's the key word there, unconsciously done, because when you speak about human evolution, you know, competence always came before comprehension. And looking back at it in the past, it was more of kind of unconscious learning when you're in that academy environment, especially for kids. Personally, what I don't like nowadays is that there's more of an effort made to make more conscious learning, that everything needs to be described, everything needs a description, everything needs a tag. You look at the likes of Borussia Dortmund, Leicester City, including cage football into their practices and describing the benefits of that. For me, that kind of goes against the ethos and the grain of it. Main reason being, like, you play football just out of love and having a passion for the game. Not everything needs to be explained. And although, of course, there's a plethora of coaching resources and everything, absolutely everything online now these days, I think there's no substitute for actually being out on the pitch doing the groundwork, because you can do all the theory, but applying it into practice, as you know yourself, having coached and worked in 4 different continents with people from all over the world, it's a totally different science altogether.
I believe so as well. You know, and I've been lucky enough to see players in so many different environments in England and in other countries that I've worked in. And kids are just learning through playing, right? You know, I remember when I was in Rwanda, we was on a tour of the country. We'd done like a grassroots tour. And, you know, you were seeing children playing barefoot on dirt pitches, you know, with rocks and stones in the way. And the way they handled the ball, you know, was unbelievable. They've not been taught that. That's self-taught. That's basically learning football from the environment that they're in. That's not a coach going, right, look, as the ball comes into you, I want you to receive the ball on the outside of your foot into space and then drive. They've learned that through the environment that they're in. And I think that's the biggest factor for me for young players, like learning from within the, you know, the environments that they set themselves. And it was just quite inspiring for me to see these kids. And I was quite shocked at the level of some of the players that I've seen. And I think if you could remove them from that environment and put them into an environment that we have in England, you know, I think they would shock a lot of people at the quality that some of these players, you know, possess. And I think it's unfortunate that the African continent doesn't have the, you know, the infrastructure that, you know, it should have, because there's so many players that have been slipped, you know, that have slipped through the net and that have been missed just because they don't have the, you know, the things in place to help, you know, develop and support them in the way that we would have in this country. But I do echo what you say. I think that the main focus for me should be all about learning through fun and in enhancing your skills in a fun way. And then a coach is like drip feeding information in to layer on top of what they already know. That's how I you know, I think it should be done, you know, and it is done in some clubs, and some clubs do it very, very well. But I'd like to see it rolled out. I think we make things quite complicated. Coaches make things complicated, and it doesn't need to be complicated, especially at a young age.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. I mean, even when you talk about unconscious learning, so to speak, being on the shoulders of giants, Tony Strudwick, he did a study on the class of 1992 at United's Cliff Training Ground, the likes of Nicky Butt, Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, David Beckham, the 2 Neville brothers, all playing beside each other, and how they all acted as role models for one another. But it was very much unconscious learning. It's only upon reflection do they realise, oh wow, that was a huge factor in our development. You know, looking even at the likes of yourself, you go to Chelsea there after Crystal Palace, and you're surrounding yourself with the likes of Neil Batt, Jim Fraser, Brendan Rodgers, Michael Beale. I mean, that experience must have been monumental to your own development, because not only were you there for 5-6 years, of course, developing the latest cohort of English and English internationals and Chelsea first team players, but you're there challenging yourself on a day-to-day basis, trying to be better than the day before. I mean, being in a high performance environment like that, what was that experience like in reflection? Was there just, I mean, was there one memorable kind of standout moment, or was it just being in amongst the thick of it on the day to day?
I was very, very lucky to get an opportunity to work at Chelsea. And I think when you get those chances and opportunities, you've got to take them, because there's always someone that's ready to take your place. One thing that I did realise at Chelsea is that you couldn't get too comfortable, because you get told. And you'd always have someone watching, whether that's you training or you delivering on a game day. There's always someone, with their eyes on you. And it wasn't necessarily to scare you, but it was just to make sure that the levels were up all the time. You're asking players to perform at the highest level that they can possibly perform at. And the academy and Chelsea in itself was asking the same of the staff. So for me, stepping into that environment and seeing what that was like firsthand, and not necessarily having had that experience prior to that, was an eye-opener to me. So it inspired me to want more and to develop, myself more, so I could, sustain a career, but also work at the highest level possible. Knowing what it takes for a young player to play in an academy from the age of 8 and then progress them right away through to 18, 19, 20, having seen that process and having seen, players that have gone through that I've worked with and supported in different ways, it's been good for me. But then also I think that the support that we had as staff as well was really good. I think what Neil Bath wanted to do there is get everyone involved. It wasn't just his vision or somebody else's vision. It was like, look, this is what we would like to do. What's your thoughts? What's your opinions? So, we would work together to create like a philosophy on how we wanted to operate, how we wanted to play. And I remember we created like a coaching philosophy, and it was like it had a plan to be the best, academy in world football, and this is how we're going to do it, and this is what we're going to, work on to get there. And that was something I'd not seen before. I was taking it to a completely different level, and we were doing things back then that, clubs were doing 5 or 6 years later. Like we had a PMA system pretty much up and running or being developed before the PMA actually was officially introduced into like the EGPP like it is now. And so Neil was always trying to stay one step ahead of like the competitors, and the competitors were at the time all the local London clubs. So like your Arsenals, your West Hams, your Tottenhams, your Cheltenhams, and then obviously further afield, you look at Man City now as well. So I think Chelsea have always tried to evolve and continue to evolve and to continue to develop their staff as well. And I think that's been paramount to their success, making sure that they've educated people that are working with players, and then those people have helped to educate and develop, the players. And you can just see there's just been a continuous conveyor belt of people that have gone into Chelsea at one level, and then moved on out, and then you look at them now doing other things, and it's good to see. It's really nice to see.
I think it's absolute testament to the work Neil Bath has done and all the other academy coaches at Chelsea over years. When you look at the proliferation of players that come through, personally as a Chelsea fan myself, I think Neil Bath is underappreciated. I think we've seen something similar at Tottenham Hotspur when John McDermott left his role to take up a role at the FA. Do they only realise, oh wow, the legacy that man left behind? But in terms of bringing players through to the first team, be it at Chelsea now, Vitesse Arnhem, further afield, players that have gone on to play for their country also, is there one single common denominator between all those? Or is it very much the case they've all had non-linear pathways to the top?
Every player's pathway is going to be different, right? So no player's the same. So that's one thing. And then players will progress at different times throughout their careers. You know, not everyone develops the same way physically. So they're going to be some players that are more physically developed, who just could be more dominant on the pitch just because of their size and how powerful they are. Then you might have some players that are really, really technical, a little bit smaller, a bit slight, that might be able to influence games in other ways. Players are just developing at completely different rates. And I think what Chelsea were good at was understanding that, I felt, at times, and, you know, recognizing where people needed to be pushed up and challenged in different areas. And I think one of the biggest things, and, you know, we've all heard it, but it's hard work and you know, and dedication to wanting to be the best, you know. And I think that word, work hard, people say, oh, you know, I do work hard and I don't get opportunities, or things don't happen for me. And I suppose then you could almost take that word away and go working smart, because you can work hard, but like working smart, focusing on the things that are going to get you to where you need to be. And I think you have to be quite selfish as well. The players that you see today, they're not where they are now because they're necessarily nice or thinking about other people. They're focusing on themselves, because at the end of the day, when a player crosses the line, whether that's in training or in a game, it's down to them. Their performance and how they play is totally down to them. The coach and the support staff are there to support and guide, and that's it. So when a player's, you know, playing a match, it's up to them, and so they need to be on point. And so there is an element of, you know, single-mindedness, a bit selfishness, you know. But I would say hard work, working smart, and dedication are the things that contribute to players that have like an ability to play the game. I think that's the difference for me. You know, like, I've seen so many talented players and played with so many talented players, and they've never made it because they didn't have that, you know, that approach. They wasn't, you know, mentally wired in that way. And, you know, like I say, everyone's different. So, but they would be the things that I would say the difference between players that are progressing on in the game to players that are not.
I think even it's just people don't realise from a young age how kind of the amount of sacrifices these players have to take. I listened to Cesc Fabregas recently, don't know if you heard, on Talent Takes Time with Robbie Savage and Matthew Said. And he said from the age of 9 to 14, 4 nights a week, he was making a 4-hour round trip from his small town in Catalonia down to Barcelona and back. And he did it once at the weekends before his parents decided 15 years of age he needed to actually move into the halls at La Masia. But of course, there's no doubting the players you've worked with at Chelsea and England have absolutely 100% earned their stripes. But one thing which struck me earlier on, you spoke about going around Rwanda, seeing these players, and, you know, you firmly believe they would have adapted to any academy environment within the UK, and they would have surprised people. How do you think those Chelsea players at that age would have adapted to an environment like Rwanda? You firmly confident in their abilities they would have adapted?
It's a difficult one because you only know what you know, right? When you grow up, you're a product of your surroundings, and so it's a difficult one to say. Even when I actually moved over there to work, you know, I wasn't ready to kind of witness the things I'd seen, and it wasn't bad things. It was just, you know, when you go to watch players play a game and they're playing on a dirt pitch, I you know, just because I've grown up in an environment where when you watch football, it's all on grass pitches or artificial pitches. You know, you don't see dirt pitches, you know, unless you was growing up in the 60s and 70s when all the pitches were like muddy and boggy. But so it's a difficult one to say. I think the reason why I say a player from like the African continent could come into a professional academy is just because of their technical ability, because of how they handle the ball and how they've mastered it, learning in the environments that they've grown up in. they would technically be able to cope with the demands of a top academy in this country or in Europe. Where they might fall down is the tactical side of the game and understanding the game. That's the biggest difference, and that's the difference that was the major, not say issue, but that was the major difference between the players I worked with in Africa and also out in Asia when I was in India. Is technically they're good, they can handle the ball well, but because of the development pathway that's not in place and the infrastructures and resources that they don't have, that their understanding of the game at times, isn't as advanced as what it would be from a young lad or a young girl playing in Europe or in another part of the world. So that would be the main difference for me.
And I suppose for a guy like yourself growing up in England, all you've known your whole life is, of course, being in the academy system at Millwall, coaching at Palace, coaching at Chelsea. What made you take the jump to move to Rwanda?
I needed another challenge. I felt that, it was getting to a stage in my career where the opportunities that I wanted weren't necessarily coming my way. And when the opportunity came to go to Rwanda, it was something that I couldn't turn down. It's a whole kind of life experience. You're working, you moved away from your home, your family and friends, your support bubble, and you're moving into a completely new country, complete unknown. You don't know anyone. And it was something that I really wanted to experience, because I felt that's what I needed at the time. And plus the job as well. The job was a big job. It was an opportunity for me to maybe build my CV, and if I'd done well there, I could get another opportunity further down the line. And that's kind of how I see it. I just felt that it was an opportunity to challenge myself in so many different ways. Challenge how I communicated with people, how I worked in a completely different environment, how I managed expectations of others, and I wanted to leave Rwanda having made a difference and made a change. And I honestly believe that in the time that I was there, I was able to do that. So that was really the driving force for me.
And I suppose for any young coaches out there and their development, how paramount is it getting that international experience?
Well, everyone's different, right? Not everyone wants to necessarily go abroad because it is quite daunting. It's not an easy thing to do. I can remember when I got the phone call to say that it's on. I've got the green light. You need to get your visa and all of that stuff. The nerves start kicking in. You're thinking, well, what happens if this? What happens here? What happens? All these things start to go through your mind. So the good thing is that when I did go, I was on my own. I was a single lad, and my only real responsibility was myself. I think it's different now. If you've got a family, you've got them to consider. So then your decision will kind of result around your family and what it's like for them. Because when you're leaving people behind, that can be very, very difficult. But I think if you want a new experience and you want to develop as a person and see life and get new life skills, then I think it's good for people to step out of that comfort zone and go, because football's not just in England, football's everywhere. But I think where you grow up watching football in this country, everyone just gets narrow-minded about football elsewhere, and it's played everywhere, and it's good players and good people that work in the game, across the whole world. So why not try and tap into that resources? And I think also as well, it shapes you as a person. I think the experiences I've had have really, really helped shape me as a person. It made me better. I think I'm a better person and I'm better at my job through going over there. Because I feel like I understand people better through doing it.
Yeah, I think just even can't emphasize the importance of football enough in terms of what it does as a social construct. I'd imagine when you would have moved to Rwanda, and later when you moved to India, your Rwandan or Indian wasn't as, as fluent as the locals. So it's just the ability to connect over a football. It's really undervalued and underappreciated what we have in terms of how powerful it is as a social construct. But then doing one big jump, moving from London to Rwanda, if that wasn't enough, you move on then to India, population of over 1 billion people. What was that like?
It was very overwhelming. Well, both jobs were overwhelming. I don't think people realize how big they are until you've actually walked away from them, because when you're in these jobs, you're almost in a little bubble yourself, and you don't really know the impact you're having across the country or across the continent at times, because you're so focused on what you're trying to achieve. You are aware of what's going on to a certain extent, because there's always noise, and there's always people that are prepared to say things in the media, or that work within the football fraternity. So I think that stepping into the limelight as such, and never having really had that experience before then, was challenging, but it was a nice challenge. And I think one thing I was thinking about this the other day, it was like, I enjoyed every moment that I was out in Rwanda and also in India, but I didn't savor those moments like I wanted to. And because you're so caught up with what you're doing, and you're so focused on the job at hand, you don't always have time to sit back and go, oh, this is good. I'm really enjoying it. Think of what we're trying to do here. You don't always get those times and those opportunities to do that. And I think if I was to get another job, overseas or even in England, that was a big job that, enabled me to have a responsibility to make a difference and make a change, then I'd want to try and savor as much of that as possible, because I don't think I did it as much as I should have done when I was out there. But the whole experience from leaving one continent to going to another was really, really good. Like, you don't realize how big India is. India is huge.
But even
massive.
But even then, you hear about players getting injured or fatigued, making long international trips for games or whatever. But you yourself, you were analysing players, the 19s, the 23s, shared landmass of the country. Remember you telling me before you yourself suffered from a bit of fatigue from all the travelling?
I remember I was with the under-19s, and we were playing in a regional like tournament. So that meant we were playing in Malaysia, Thailand, and Japan. So it was like leading up to the international window, which was in the November as well. So because I was working with the under-19s and also the senior team, when the senior team games were on, then I would travel with the squad and be a part of the staff. But leading up to this particular game, we was out in Malaysia with the under-19s, and the amount of traveling that I had done prior to this trip, I was on a plane probably every 2 or 3 days trying to, go to different places. So we played in Malaysia. We were due to fly back home, back to India, play a game in India, and then fly back to fly over to Japan. But we ended up staying in Malaysia to play a game. And then we ended up flying from there to Japan and then back. But during the flight from Malaysia to Japan, I remember sitting in the plane, my back completely seized up. It completely locked up on me. And, I'm 6'3", 6'4". And when you've been in an airplane for a long period of time and you're literally going from one place to another, and being that the seats were so tight together, like my knees were up by my chin. My back completely locked up on me and I couldn't move. And I remember actually having to get assisted off the airplane, and going through checkout. But then we played the game, and I remember doing the match, and I actually couldn't even stand up on the sidelines. I had to get my assistants to go and give the players instructions because I was in such a bad way. I then flew back to India, and the national team, the senior team, were due to be in camp on the Sunday. So I flew back on the Thursday. So I went to the gaffer at the time. So I look, gaffer, I'm in a bad way. I don't know if I'll be able to make camp. It's like, listen, we need you here. You've got to come. I said, look, I'm literally bent over like an old man. I can't move. And I remember having to go to the hospital, and I had to crawl on my hands and knees to go and get an MRI scan. And then ended up flying out that Sunday to join the team, and then was a part of the game, that week. But I couldn't actually coach because I was literally bedridden for 4 days. And it was purely due to the traveling that we were doing over there. Like when we would travel in country, because I was based in Goa. So I'd travel from, if I wanted to go and see a player or see a game that was in Shillong, which is in the northeast part of India, I'd have to fly from Goa to Delhi, from Delhi to somewhere in the northeast, and then get a driver to then drive me like 3 or 4 hours to the location. So you're doing like 2 flights. It doesn't look that far on a map, but it takes you over a day to get there. So it's like that was quite an eye opener, the amount of traveling that I was doing. I think in 1 year it totaled about 95 flights I ended up doing.
Well, I suppose
that's including my trips home as well.
You can be rest assured, such times would call in, they would call into question your commitment to the game of football. Most instances, it really is a blind love. I mean, you speak there earlier on about not being able there in Rwanda or India to kind of enjoy the moment, enjoy those experiences. But as you said yourself earlier on, when you're in a high pressure environment like Chelsea and they're breathing down your neck, the guys in charge there being like, there's no time to rest on your laurels here. Having worked in football for so long, coaching as well, the highest, the best of the best, and players from all over the world, I suppose you can't really help but get into a flow state. I mean, how could someone like myself, even over here coaching at the moment, how could you take a step back and appreciate the moment a bit more? Because personally, I'd find that hard myself once you're so kind of immersed and ingrained in what you're doing.
So I don't necessarily always mean around the job. So if you're fortunate to travel and go to countries, for example, maybe take the time to actually explore the country or go and see something that you're, when you're out there. That's for me quite important, like understanding different cultures and seeing the world differently. Like we was in Bhutan and we played Bhutan, beautiful country, unbelievable. And after the game on the Saturday, we had the Sunday off. So we all decided as a group that we wanted to go and see a temple, a Buddhist temple called a Tiger's Nest, which was literally hanging off a cliff, 2,000 or 3,000 feet up. And it took about four hours to trek up there. But, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity to do that, because to actually get a visa to go into Bhutan, it's $250 a day. And, it's quite expensive and they rely on the tourism. So we were there for free. We were there representing India, we were playing. So why not use the opportunity to go and see a bit of the country? So that's really what I mean, more than necessarily the actual footballing moments as such. I think it's important to enjoy the game. I think it's important to enjoy when you lose, and then also reflect on things that maybe haven't gone so well. But try to take in what's around you. Like you're living in Dubai at the moment. It's an unbelievable place to be, and there's a lot of people that would love to be out there. So for me, if I was in your position, I'd be trying to, see as much of the city or different parts of the UAE as possible, because you never know when you might leave, and I wouldn't want to miss out on opportunities in the future because of that. I think that's easy. You do end up getting sucked into what you're doing. You end up going into this routine of doing the same things every day. And then you actually forget where you are. And then by the time you end up leaving, that opportunity is gone. So I suppose that's really what I meant by like living the moment and appreciating things a bit more. It's probably more from a cultural sense, a cultural standpoint.
Yeah, no, I definitely echo that. I mean, even just doing the podcast now, or just stuff in terms of personal development, speaking with lads like yourself, like, it kind of does give you that moment of reflection, and it's always kind of great to take that bird's eye view from the sky. What would Lee do? What would this coach do? What would that coach do? Even speaking with family at home in Ireland, that's how you kind of appreciate the opportunity a bit more and value it. But then, going back to Chelsea once more, I suppose a lot of your career has centered around youth development, player development, working at the underage level. You look at some of your closest mates in the game, such as Michael Beale, who's gone on to win that 55th title for Rangers in the past week. Look at someone like Brendan Rodgers, the success he's had on game now. Would you ever consider a move into first team coaching?
Oh, 100%. If it was right for me, then 100%, because I think that's everyone's aspirations of working at the highest level. Like working with the senior team in Rwanda and also in India, there's a bug that comes with it, So it is like a drug that I can see why people get fixated on working at senior level, because of all the positive stress that comes with that, and then also dealing with the negative stresses as well. It's it's something that is quite unique, and it can't really describe. It's something that everyone goes through differently. But if an opportunity came for me to work in first team football, then I would definitely think about it seriously, because it's where I want to be. I want to work at the highest level that possible, and yeah, I think you've always got to have these dreams and aspirations of trying to reach the top of your profession, and so, but like Michael, for example, it's taken him 20 odd years to get where he is at. He's not literally just walked into a job, and people, forget that. He's actually done the hard yards. He's had his own business. He's worked part-time. He's done various jobs, at the start of his career that have opened up opportunities for him to have a solid career in the game. So for him to have achieved what he's achieved now, it's taken him over 20 years to accomplish that. And so for coaches or for people out there that may listen to this thinking, it's going to be a quick fix. I'm going to do this, and this, and bang, I'll be in, working at that level. It's not going to happen for everyone, and the chances of that happening are quite small. So, and see, even the same with myself. It's like, I've done the jobs I've done, but I've had to do all of the hard work and would make all the sacrifices, before that to be in these positions and have these experiences.
It's more or less the iceberg analogy. You can only ever really see the tip. And then going forward, I suppose, big question, where do you see yourself in 10 years' time, Lee?
It's a really difficult one. I've been asked this many times, because I am ambitious. I want to achieve things, but you don't know what's around the corner. So we just use the pandemic as an example. No one knew that we was going to have a pandemic and everyone was going to be on a total lockdown, and that's literally stopped everyone from doing certain things that they wanted to do. So I think for me personally, I tried to keep my goals a little shorter in time. So I'm doing a course at the moment with the Premier League, the EHOC. I'd like to get that done and out of the way. So I'm due to graduate at the end of the year, early next year. I want to keep learning and keep educating myself, and should opportunities come for me to work in youth development, but at a top club, then that's what I would consider. Or if an opportunity came for me to work in senior level, then that's what I would consider as well. So I wouldn't want to kind of pigeonhole myself to going, right, that's exactly what I want to do, because I've had a taste of every job within a player pathway, from a grassroots coach to a community officer to working in schools, to a youth developer, coach educator, and international coach. So I've experienced a lot, so I wouldn't want to necessarily kind of say one thing. I think like I'd like to keep myself open to opportunities that should come away, hopefully. But ultimately, I want to be working at the highest level that I can possibly work at.
Of course. And for someone, I suppose, I'm just curious, someone like yourself, Lee, that's worked in all aspects of the game, do you truly believe a coach ever hits their ceiling? Even you look at the highest level now, someone like Pep Guardiola, he's made small little adaptations to the positional play system he's displayed at Manchester City. Do you think there's ever a case in point for reaching the so-called nadir?
Yes, I do actually. I do think there comes a point where a coach or a professional reaches their ceiling. The only reason they would reach their ceiling is if they're not willing to evolve with the times. Because if your mindset is that, well, this is what worked for me 15 years ago, it's going to work for me now, then time and the game's going to just completely pass you by. So the older you get, the game's going to evolve at a rapid rate. You've got to keep yourself educated. You've got to learn off other people. But then also, if you're in a position where you can have people to surround you, then you bring in people that can help influence your decisions and make you better at what you do. So if your mindset is literally, well, this is what I've done all these years ago, should work now, then you would hit a ceiling. But if you're open-minded and you want to you want to evolve and always learn and develop, then I don't think you will. You've got to be open-minded. You can't be closed-minded in football or in any industry. You've always got to be with the times and seeing what's out there, and also recognizing that you might have been good 10, 15 years ago at what you do, but there's going to be people that are better. Okay, so rather than maybe necessarily being scared of those people that are better than you, how can you actually harness them and draw their knowledge and their expertise to make you better? And if you look at some of the best managers around the world, that's what they've done. They've got in really, really good people around them. They've been very good at managing people, managing situations, but they've picked certain people that specialize in certain areas of the game, and they've had a big influence in teams and clubs, becoming successful.
And then to close, I suppose, would you have any advice for someone like me, currently 25 years of age, about to enroll on UEFA B, just kind of having the experience I've had today back at home in Ireland, North America, over here now in Dubai, just eager to kind of explore my own potential, my own ceiling, no kind of end goal in mind or end pursuit, rather just kind of seeing where football takes me. Do you have any advice for coaches like myself or any others who are on a similar pathway?
I think take your time and always be willing to learn and keep yourself educated. Like this, and I kind of, in some ways, when I see a lot of coaches nowadays that are really, really eager to get all their qualifications as quickly as they can, and they want to get in professional football and work at certain clubs or in certain positions, within such a short period of time, that's fine. And everyone's needs or everyone's kind of desires are different, but you can't beat knowledge and experience. So if you can apply experience to the knowledge you're gaining from the courses that you're on, and then merge those together, that's going to make you a much better coach and a much better person. That's hopefully then going to stand you in good stead for the future. What I see is there's a lot of coaches that get all their qualifications but have no experience to back up their knowledge. And I think that take your time, have an ambition of what you want to achieve and where you'd want to be in the game, but also, be open-minded to new ideas and reach out to people like you do and like people do, because you're always learning. You can continuously learning, and you have to have that kind of that growth mindset, within the game. But that would be my real kind of advice for coaches that are coming through that want a career in football. And listen, some people get an opportunity early doors. I'm not saying, oh, don't take it. Of course, take it, because you never know where that leads. And it's good to be in somewhere than not in somewhere, But I just think that try to broaden your horizons and get lots of different experiences, whether that's life experiences, cultural experiences, and professional experience, because all of those things will make you a better person and a better understander of people, and make you better at your job.
Absolutely superb. Lee, I always love speaking with you, not just about coaching, youth development, all things really. Should anyone wish to have a similar conversation with yourself, or just chat on social media, where is best to connect?
So you can connect with me on Twitter, Lee Johnson 80. I'm also on LinkedIn, and on LinkedIn there's my email address as well if you want to reach out to me. But they're the two best places. Or if anyone's listening, they can reach out to you and you can forward on my details. So I haven't got an issue with that.
Fantastic. Lee, top man as always.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.